Coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, the team has a very high-profile quarterback in for a visit today at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center, plus a lot of NFL draft talk with ESPN's Todd McShay. He had his pre-draft conference call on Wednesday, got a lot of sound bites from that, some really good stuff, plus your calls and texts, all coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast, Thursday, April 6, 2023.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you listen to podcasts and get the latest edition of the show as soon as it's available. And if you're checking us out on YouTube, we definitely appreciate you. Love the growth of the show. Over 5,000 subscribers, and it's all because of my guy, Ari. Definitely want to shout him out. At Ari Produces on Twitter. Makes sure that we do a great job and get up on YouTube each and every day, and he's the only reason we're up on YouTube. Please believe that. So many thanks to my guy, Ari, again on Twitter, at Ari Produces. Today's show is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of the NFL. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. We'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show, but got plenty of news and notes to get to, including the fact that Alabama quarterback Bryce Young is visiting on a top 30 visit to the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center today. That's a big deal. We all know that the Raiders picked number 7 overall. We all know that the Raiders attempted to trade up to the number 1 overall spot with Chicago. Eventually, the Bears traded with the Carolina Panthers, and the Raiders are still sitting there at number 7. But clearly, they're doing their due diligence on all the quarterbacks. Will Levis from Kentucky was in on Monday. Anthony Richardson from Florida is going to be in on Friday. And Bryce Young from Alabama is in today. So that's 3 of the top 4 quarterbacks, right? Of course, C.J. Stroud is still the only one that they haven't scheduled a top 30 visit with. And I would not be shocked with about 3 weeks left to go before the first round of the NFL draft comes up from Kansas City that they'll definitely have C.J. Stroud in the building as well. So clearly they're taking their time to make sure that they have all their I's dotted and their T's crossed on the decision that they make when they go up to the podium and get their first pick in, no matter if that's number 7 overall, if that's number 3 overall, if they trade back to number 11, whatever the case may be, they're leaving no stone unturned, which is exactly the job of the front office. So making sure they handle their business. So Bryce Young in for a visit at the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center today. Also, on Wednesday, it was a big day. It was a fun day, man. Todd McShay from ESPN, and I know everyone's not a big Todd McShay guy, and look, there's been Mel Kiper, Daniel Jeremiah's had his, Matt Miller and Jordan Reed had their pre-draft conference call the other day. Todd McShay had his opportunity to get his time to shine on Wednesday. He had his pre-draft conference call, and lots of really good stuff. So, of course, because we've been talking about Anthony Richardson and the opportunity for the Raiders to potentially trade up to the number 3 spot and go get him, and should they not, whatever the case may be, I asked Todd McShay straight up, hey, should the Raiders have interest in trading up to the number 3 spot? On his latest mock draft, he had Devin Witherspoon from Illinois, cornerback, going number 7 to the Raiders, but he had the Colts trading up from number 4 to number 3 to go get Anthony Richardson. Now, that's only a 1 spot up, but I asked him straight up, should the Raiders be interested in trading to the number 3 spot to go get Anthony Richardson? Here's Todd McShay from ESPN.
Yeah, I mean, you can make the argument that they should be, and it would be a really good spot for Richardson, just being able to go in with Garoppolo there and have a year at least to develop. And he's only going to be 21 as a rookie compared to like Will Levis, who's going to be 24, Hendon Hooker, who's going to turn 26 in the end of his rookie season. So you've got time to develop Richardson. You don't have the game experience that you want to see, and there's a lot to work with, and game reps are going to be hard to replicate. But I don't think, like, just talking to people in the league and other sources that I have, I get the sense that if it's not a quarterback named Stroud or Young, they're just not interested in not only moving up, but even probably taking a quarterback at number 7. I think they have so many other needs that they're kind of focused on. So I know they did their due diligence. I think they had as many dinners the night before pro days with these top guys as the Carolina Panthers did. They just didn't bring the owner and his wife like Carolina did. But they definitely have done their due diligence on the group. I know that they tried to move up to that number 1 spot, didn't get a deal done. Carolina did. And so my information is that if it's not Young or Stroud, they're just going to try to build up their roster in other places.
So there you go. There's Todd McShay's thoughts. Hey, it's still a good landing spot because you don't have to put him into action immediately, right? Jimmy G is there. Brian Hoyer is there. So there's guys that are veterans that can help Anthony Richardson along. But you heard what he said, right? I mean, from people he's talked to, from people around the league, everything he's understanding, if it's not C.J. Stroud, it's not Bryce Young in the top 10, the Raiders aren't interested in a quarterback at that time. So it sounds like they're not interested in Anthony Richardson. So I put out the tweet on Wednesday. Todd McShay, to me, right now on his pre-draft conference call when talking about quarterbacks, says his understanding from his sources talking around the league, if it's not C.J. Stroud or Bryce Young, the Raiders aren't interested. My tweet almost had about 400 and something plus likes when I put that out. So a lot of folks are excited about the fact that the Raiders look like that they're going to go and attack the defense and really try to build that up as opposed to trade up and try to go get a quarterback that has so many questions. And of course, it's always very difficult to evaluate the quarterback position when they're transitioning from college to the NFL. So one of the questions asked to Todd McShay on his pre-draft conference call is, why? Why is it so tough to evaluate quarterbacks as they transition to the next level?
I mean, we could go into a 15, 20-minute conversation about evaluating quarterbacks. There's a lot to it. So much, I think that gets overlooked in terms of like how comfortable are they in their skin? Who are they as a person? What's their, true level of football intelligence, and how do they translate what they learn on film and in the meeting rooms to the field? That it kind of starts there for me. And that's the hardest thing to uncover because it's not necessarily all like shows up easily to see on tape. And then obviously like the traits, to me, the most important traits are mental makeup and accuracy. And then you get into arm strength and mobility and all that, but the game is changing too. And mobility used to be kind of lowest on the list. And it's increasingly becoming more important at that position, especially for young guys. I think, when you evaluate quarterbacks early in their career, do they have them? They're not going to have all the answers to the test. When they take the snap, the snapshot pre-snap, and then see how everything has changed post-snap. It's too much for a lot of rookies to be able to diagnose and to understand. So they're going to make mistakes, and all rookies make a lot more mistakes than veteran guys do for an obvious reason. And so having that mobility as a fallback and to be able to bail out with your feet has really helped a lot of these younger guys. Like Josh Allen, that was huge early in his career. It still is a big part of his game, but early in his career to get out of trouble. Jalen Hurts, the same thing. Lamar Jackson, like these guys have all developed into better pocket passers as their career has progressed. But to have that early in their career as a break glass in case of emergency, and there just so happens to be a lot more emergencies when you're a rookie quarterback compared to years 2, 3, and 4. So, that part has become, a much more important part of the evaluation with these quarterbacks coming up, because it's a different game than it was 5, 7, 10 years ago. Supporting cast, the system they're in, like Hendon Hooker becomes a harder evaluation because you don't see a lot of that system, that Art Briles system in the NFL. So how much was manufactured for him versus how much, and a lot of half field reads instead of full field reads. And then you got to get to know him and study him. And the reports from every team I've talked to is he's done a great job in getting on the board and understands concepts and can go back to his Virginia Tech playbook and recite everything like he was playing in it yesterday. Like that's part of like why it's so important with the quarterbacks to have individual time, private workouts, private meetings, to really study their brain and how they learn. So, there's so many complications to the quarterback position, but those are just a few of them.
So there you go. ESPN's Todd McShay right there, kind of breaking it down, many different reasons, even bringing up Hendon Hooker, many different reasons. It depends on the team, depends on the scheme, depends on what they, how they're set up in college, what's around them, and also, just the team that they go to. Sometimes it just doesn't work out the way that it's supposed to. And a very lengthy answer right there from Todd McShay. And that's the one thing that he did consistently throughout the whole course of that pre-draft conference call. His answers were very, very detailed. And I'm not mad at that. I really do appreciate the extra thought and the extra time that he put into it. Another soundbite from Todd McShay in his pre-draft conference call was about how teams may get aggressive for that number 3 spot. I feel like C.J. Stroud, Bryce Young are going to be gone 1, 2, but we all know that the 3rd spot, Arizona, they don't need a quarterback. They have Kyler Murray. So How many teams might get aggressive and look at that number 3 spot and say, yeah, you know what? We're going to go try to move up there and go get our quarterback. Here's Todd McShay answering that question.
You know, the top 2 quarterbacks we know are going to go, whether it's Young, Stroud, or Stroud Young, with those first 2 picks. Then you've got Arizona sitting there, and they're open for business. You know, I think in a perfect world, they'd get a deal done with the Colts to move back 1 spot and still get the guy that they want in Will Anderson, the edge rusher out of Alabama. But here's, like, you look at it, and Seattle has been so involved in the pro days. They clearly would like to bring in a young quarterback to have on the back end of Geno, in case Geno can't sustain success, or just because when's the next time Seattle's going to be picking at 5, right? And that this is a pick that they got in a trade. So they're looking at this as an opportunity to get a quarterback on the cheap that they can develop behind Anthony Richardson. But I don't see them as a team that wants to trade up even 2 spots, because while they love to get a quarterback at 5, if they start to give away some of their other picks, and they're coming off the best draft in the NFL a year ago with John Schneider and Pete Carroll, and really replenish their roster with a bunch of rookies that made huge impacts, they don't want to give away picks and not be able to build on what they established last year. So I don't see them moving up. I mentioned the Raiders. If there's about a 1% chance that the top 2 quarterbacks don't go 1-2, and in that case, to me, yeah, the Raiders would trade up to get one of those guys at number 3. But as long as it's Stroud and Young, it picks 1 and 2 either way, I don't see them moving up. So then you get to Tennessee at 11, Washington at 16, and Tampa Bay at 19. And I can visualize those guys moving up for the 3rd quarterback if he starts to fall. Like if the Colts wind up, hell bent on getting a deal done for Lamar Jackson and not take a quarterback at 4 or not move up to 3, then I think you could see some of those other teams try to move up the board, maybe to somewhere in like that 6, 7, 8 range, and depending on what Seattle does at 5. So it'll be interesting to see. I don't envision Tennessee or Washington or Tampa making a huge move up to number 3. It's just going to cost so much to do so. But it'll be interesting to see where Richardson goes, where Levis goes. If one of them start to fall a little bit, or both of them start to fall a little bit, then I think if you get in, to 7 to 10 range, then it's more conceivable that one of those teams would wind up moving up.
So there you go. Another very detailed answer and kind of laying out all the teams that could potentially trade up. And, again, he brings up the Raiders and saying, hey, if it's not CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, he doesn't see them trading up to number 3. So a question that I posed to Raider Nation on Raider Nation Radio 920 Unnecessary Roughness on Wednesday was, okay, so just based off of what Todd McShay is saying, if Bryce Young or CJ Stroud happens to fall to that number 3 spot, which most likely won't happen, right? Most likely they're going to go 1-2 like we expect. And who knows if it's Stroud 1 or Young 1. I mean, it doesn't really matter. I believe those 2 guys are gone by the time the second pick is over. But just, for S's and giggles, if one of them happens to be there at number 3, should the Raiders go make that move to trade up? That was a question I asked on Unnecessary Roughness. And a lot of fans said, yeah. A lot of fans say, yeah, if that's their guy, go get it. But if not, then just stay right there at number 7 or trade back, collect more picks, and get as many guys on defense as possible. And I'm good with that. I agree with that. I have no problem with that at all. But the one thing I'll caution is if you're going to trade back, don't trade back too far where you trade yourself out of an alpha dog. The Raiders need to come out of this draft on defense with an alpha dog, right? Don't trade too far back where you're just getting a really good player instead of a dude who can be an absolute leader, right? A stud. The Raiders need more studs, and they just don't have enough of them. I've been stressing it for a very long time. They just don't have that guy that, the Raiders are coming to town. That's the guy you got to watch out for. Of course, Max Crosby is that guy, but teams can scheme to slow down Max Crosby. The Raiders need to have more guys that keep offensive coordinators up at night concerned, right? Okay, this guy's a difference maker. Got to watch out for him. Oh, Max Crosby is a difference maker. Got to watch out for him. They need to start getting into the habit of having more difference makers. Of course, defensive coordinators are concerned because of Devontae Adams. Difference makers are concerned with all the offensive weapons that they have, and depending on how healthy Jimmy G could be and how quickly he can get into the Josh McDaniels scheme, I can see opposing defensive coordinators being concerned, staying up at night because the Raiders' offense is going to be really good, but that defense doesn't scare anybody right now, so they've got to make sure that they address that. So that's some sound from Todd McShay when it comes to the quarterbacks, the offensive side of things from his pre-draft conference call, about 1 hour long, 1 hour strong, some really good stuff. Coming up in segment number 2, going to focus on the defensive side of things. Again, remember, Devin Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois. You want to talk about an alpha dog? That's an alpha dog. That's who Todd McShay has mocked at number 7 overall for the Raiders to select. We'll hear why about Witherspoon. We'll hear about Gonzalez, and we'll hear about more defensive players coming up in segment number 2 after I tell you about the title sponsor, which is FanDuel. And I don't know if you're watching the NBA games, but man, the playoffs are almost here. So it's the perfect time to download FanDuel. It's America's #1 sports book. New customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if first bet does not win. All you got to do is download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and it's super easy to use. Then you can bet on anything. Money line, points scored, how many threes are hitting the game. Doesn't matter. FanDuel's got you. Plus, they'll even let you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. Don't miss a chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn about more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Heard from ESPN's Todd McShay, all things offense, really all things quarterbacks in segment number 1. So now I want to turn my attention to the defensive side of things. And again, on his mock draft 4.0, he has Devin Witherspoon going number 7 to the Raiders. That's the cornerback out of Illinois. And then right after him at number 8, he has Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon, going to the Atlanta Falcons. So those are 1, 2. So on the conference call on Wednesday, I asked him about kind of comparing and contrasting Gonzalez and Witherspoon and why he had Devin Witherspoon as his number 1 cornerback. Here's Todd McShay talking about Gonzalez and Devin Witherspoon.
So Gonzalez, to me, like Devin Witherspoon from Illinois is going to be the first corner taken because he's the most complete. And he's a ball hawk. He's really good in coverage. But Witherspoon, he's just so physical. And in the NFL now, with so much of the screen game and teams being spread out, you've got to be able to tackle at the cornerback position. I think where that's Witherspoon's strength, that's the area that Gonzalez has got to improve upon. He is not a great tackler. He's not great in run support. He's got to get better in those areas. But he's 6'1", almost 200 pounds, and he is a physical freak. I mean, he ran a 4.38, one of the best 40-yard dashes, had a 41.5-inch vertical jump, 11.1 broad jump. And when you just watch in terms of like the blend of athletic traits that you're looking for in terms of quick feet, fluid hips, blazing, top end speed, and the ability to close on receivers. And when he gets out of phase, he's just so fast that he's able to get quickly back into phase and recover. So I just think he's got the best pure cover corner skill set in this year's class. And that's why I think like Witherspoon is more complete. If you're looking for the best cover corner, just take away your number 1 receiver. Gonzalez is going to be your guy. And that's why those are the top 2 corners in this class.
So there's not a whole lot of difference between the two guys. Obviously, Witherspoon has a little bit more skill as far as tackling and getting after it a little bit more physical than Christian Gonzalez, but you can hear him talking about Christian Gonzalez a little bit better of a cover corner. Obviously, those are the best 2 guys, similar to a year ago when it was Sauce Gardner and Derek Stingley. And I'm not saying that those guys are at the same level as Sauce and Derek, but it's just basically how it was. It was cornerback 1 and quarterback 1A, and that's how it's going to go with Gonzalez and Witherspoon. And it really depends, and I kind of used this phrase on Raider Nation Radio 920 on Wednesday. It really depends on what flavor Kool-Aid you prefer. Some people prefer grape, some people prefer red. So whatever your flavor is which one you're going to go with, Christian Gonzalez or Devin Witherspoon. But those will be the first 2 corners taken off the board, no doubt about it. So again, Witherspoon out of Illinois was the one that he mocked to the silver and black at number 7 overall. So another question that I asked him was about the gap between Witherspoon and Gonzalez and then the rest of the first round DBs like Porter, Joey Porter Jr., and others. This is a very lengthy answer, but he brings some really good names to the table that could be had in the first round, even later in the first round. Here it is. Todd McShay talking about first round defensive backs.
I think there is a difference between the first 2 guys, but it's not a massive gap. Witherspoon, I went through Witherspoon and Gonzalez in pretty good detail. Joey Porter is not quite as smooth in coverage as Gonzalez. And he's a little bit inconsistent with his gap discipline and sometimes will get himself out of position. But man, if you're playing the cover 3, even cover 1, and looking for press cover corners, Joey Porter Jr. from Penn State's your guy. I mean, he is tall, 6'2.5", 193 pounds, 34-inch arms. I mean, when you have that length of a left tackle out at cornerback, it allows you to reroute receivers, get physical, and really stunt their stem as a receiver. And then he's got the top end speed. He ran better than I thought he actually would. He ran a 4.46 in the 40, so he can recover too if he's stalking guys after press man or press zone. So I really like him as a player. Didn't have great interception production. I think he only had 1 interception last year, but he had 11 pass breakups. So he's around the ball a lot, and it's tough to throw around a guy with that kind of length. So to me, Porter Jr. is the third corner. After that, there are 2 other guys I think belong in the first round. Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State, who's a toothpick. I think he was 166 pounds at the combine. 6'1", 166, but he's got long arms. He actually, typically a guy like that who's tall and long is better in press coverage. He has great eyes in zone coverage, off coverage. And you look at his production, 14 career interceptions, 6 returned for touchdowns. I mean, you talk about a guy with instincts and recognition skills and the ability to understand route combinations. You see him peel off of his guy and go make a play on the ball because he knows when to get his eyes in the backfield and figure out where the quarterback's going with the ball and get early jumps consistently. So I think he belongs in the first. And I also think I would say Deonte Banks from Maryland's another guy. A little bit inconsistent when the ball's in the air, but he's got the traits to be a really good player. And he had a really good season this past year at Maryland. He's 6 foot, almost 32-inch arms. He ran a 4.35 with a 42-inch vertical. So at the cornerback position, the length speed combination is more important than probably any other position. When it comes to testing, it's probably the most important position to have the high test scores and the traits that you look for, because these guys, it seems like they come in, if they're in the right system that utilizes their ability. Typically, you're gonna find corners that wind up playing better and having more production in the NFL than they did in college if you utilize what they do best. And Seattle's been doing that for a long time, and they did this past year with their late round rookie cornerback. So, to me, those are the 4 corners that belong. And then you get down to I look at the Michigan corner. DJ Turner is another guy that could sneak in the late first as well.
So a very long, lengthy call right there, not call, but answer from Todd McShay talking about the defensive backs that could be had in the first round. But man, Emmanuel Forbes, the cornerback out of Mississippi State, did that not just pop off the speakers or pop out of the speakers to you? Or if you're watching on YouTube, did it not pop off the screen? Emmanuel Forbes, I mean, having all that kind of production in school, I talk about guys like that all the time, right? Guys that are used to having their hands on the ball, guys that are accustomed to going and getting the ball and doing something with it, not just breaking up a pass, but intercepting a pass, turning it over, right? Creating turnovers and then taking it to the house. Six pick sixes in his career, 14 career interceptions. That's a dude that is used to having his hands on the ball. Not a very, heavy guy, 161, very light, and being as tall as he is, I mean, I think Todd McShay described him perfectly. He said he's a toothpick, right? And he is. He's very thin, very lanky, but man, the dude gets his hands on the ball. So as much as I'm into Witherspoon, as much as I'm into Gonzalez, you always talk about, or people have talked about the Raiders trading back, collecting multiple picks. If there was a shot that they could possibly get Emmanuel Forbes at the end of the first round or maybe even the second round, that would be a guy I would definitely consider. Again, here's a write-up on him because I was so enamored, I had to go and do a little bit deeper dive. Said in a deep cornerback class, many fans will scoff at his recent day one trend from numerous NFL draft experts after showing up to the combine as the lightest defensive back of the entire class, 161 pounds. However, Forbes parlayed that to his advantage by running a blazing 4.35 40-yard dash. Despite the razor-thin frame, Ford put up 3 years of tape proving he can excel in the run game, cooling concerns about his physicality and durability at the next level. Forbes' stock has been red hot since coming out of high school as one of the country's best cornerback recruits and picking off 5 passes his freshman year. With 14 career interceptions, 20 pass deflections, and a new FBS record 6 career pick sixes, Forbes possesses arguably the most important trait a defensive back can have, which is ball skills and a knack for the end zone. Despite a loaded cornerback class, teams are coming around on his profile, and Forbes has found his way into the top 20 pick in recent mock drafts. And just for S's and giggles, which I like to reference quite a bit, he has Emmanuel Forbes from Mississippi State, that's Todd McShay it is, going to the New York Giants at number 25 overall. So I wonder if he could drop a little bit. I wonder if he could drop in the round 2 and maybe the Raiders could select him there. Or maybe with all their 12 picks that they have, maybe they trade back into the back end of round 1 and select him. So maybe they do go with a defensive lineman at number 7 overall. And then instead of getting Witherspoon, instead of getting Gonzalez, go and get a Forbes maybe at the back end of round 1 and have a guy that is used to having the ball in his hands. 14 career interceptions in school and 6 pick sixes. You think he can't turn that into something in the next level? I guarantee that he can. That's a guy I'd be very, very intrigued by. I will definitely do a lot more research on Emmanuel Forbes, get someone on the show talking about him, whether it's on the radio station or the podcast or both. We'll definitely make that happen. Now, want to close out segment number 2, talking about edge rushers. And I thought this was a really good question asked to Todd McShay about edge rushers that could be had in later rounds and provide great value. Here he is, Todd McShay from ESPN, talking about later round edge rushers.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't want to bore you with a bunch of names in the late rounds, but I think 3rd, 4th round, there are some guys that could be really good values. Like Nick Herbig from Wisconsin, highly productive pass rusher. He's just undersized, and so where do you play him? Do you play him off the ball linebacker and utilize him as an edge or blitzer on passing downs? But he's a guy who just knows how to get to the quarterback. Yasir Abdullah from Louisville is another guy who's an edge rusher that I think brings a lot of value. Just looking at Carl Brooks of Bowling Green, defensive end, I think is a better player than most people think. I don't even think he was invited to the combine, but Brooks is a player that I think has potential. Nick Hampton from Appalachian State is another name, 4th, 5th round that could wind up being productive. Moro Ojomo, the defensive end from Texas. So those are a few guys. And then Yaya Diaby from Louisville, really productive this last year. I like his traits. I think he is probably a 3rd round pick, 3rd, 4th round, early 4th round, could wind up being a steal in this year's draft too.
So there you go. The one thing I've learned about this draft as I've been doing research and been talking to multiple guys, didn't matter who it is, if it's Mel Kiper Jr., Daniel Jeremiah, Matt Miller, Jordan Reed, Todd McShay, or anybody else that covers the NFL draft, that is very deep when it comes to defensive players. So if your team, a.k.a. the Raiders, need to turn their defensive woes around, this is the draft to do it. And you have 12 draft picks to get it done. Dave Ziegler, Josh McDaniels, Champ Kelly, Patrick Graham should be fired up about that opportunity to go and turn that side of the ball around. There's plenty of players in the first round and later rounds that they can do that with. So I know a lot of people are saying you can only get a really good defensive tackle or edge rusher in the first round. If that's what you believe, so be it. Go get a guy at number 7 that you feel fills that void. There's corners pretty deep, but Todd McShay just rolled out right there how you can get an edge rusher later on and be really good value as well. That's all I got for you for segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Wanted to let you hear what Todd McShay had to say, all things defense, when it came to his pre-draft conference call from Wednesday. And please believe there's a lot more where that came from. Maybe get some more of that coming up on tomorrow's show as we close out the week really strong. But your calls and texts are coming up next, 707-654-4693. That's the Locked On Raiders podcast. We'll get those calls next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and texts straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's start off with a call from Mario in Tucson. He's calling to talk about what it would mean if the Raiders selected Christian Gonzalez, number 7 overall, in this upcoming draft. Here he is, Mario in Tucson.
Q, Raider Nation. Mario in Tucson again. I had a couple more things to say, so I thought I'd call back. I think that drafting Christian Gonzalez in the first round will send a clear message that we are trying to work on this defense. You know, I'm kind of tired of bringing in guys that have played on other teams that haven't been productive. We need this defense to step it up. They were horrible last year. horrible. We'd have a lead. We couldn't keep a lead. You know, and to be honest, none of the defensive problems was about Derek Carr. Yeah, I said it. None of the defensive stuff was about Derek Carr. It was about the defense. We just didn't have enough talent. And the guys that we did have, you know, I'm not going to even talk about Max. Max did his job. Chandler Jones came on late. He's good everywhere on this defense. Everywhere. And to be honest, who wouldn't want a bunch of young studs out there playing their asses off, helping us win games? Because at the end, that's what this is all about. It's about winning games. Winning games, winning in the playoffs, and winning Super Bowls. That's what it's all about. Now, yeah, a lot of people are upset because all these Patriots guys are coming in, but maybe they can show the rest of the team how to win games because they did so much of it. And again, I can't stress it enough. This draft needs to be focused around that defense. One young quarterback and the rest of those picks defense. I don't care if you trade up, trade back, trade sideways. They just need to go in there and get the job done. It's time. It's time for this team to take the next step. It's time for this team to step up and be Raiders. I'm not going to care about a Patriot way because there ain't no Patriot way when you play for the Raiders. Everybody's getting that messed up. It's a Raider way. And right now, the Raider way should be focused on getting this talent and winning games, winning playoffs, winning championships. That's what the Raider way needs to be. Going in there, doing your job. And if you can't do your job, your ass ain't playing. That's all I got to say. Q, Raider Nation, peace.
Thank you so much for the call, my man. Appreciate you. And yeah, I mean, I believe, like you believe, that the Raiders need to go real heavy on the defensive side of things when it comes to the upcoming draft. And it's funny, I think about the Raiders as I thought about the Carolina Panthers the year that Matt Rule took over. And I know Matt Rule didn't work out in the NFL. Now he's at Nebraska. But what I know about Matt Rule, when he took over at Carolina, the first draft he did, and you go back and look, every single player that the Carolina Panthers selected in the draft that year was on the defensive side of the ball. He knew that the defense was trash. He knew it had to be replenished, and he went out there and got some really good defensive players. And guess what? Carolina has a really good defense right now. So it's shown that it could be done. Now, the problem with Matt Rule is they didn't have a quarterback, and he never could get a quarterback, and he brought in multiple guys, including Sam Darnold, Baker Mayfield, and others, Teddy Bridgewater, Cam Newton he brought back. I mean, he had every quarterback under the sun, and it didn't work out. So that was on him. But for the defensive side of things, he did some really good things and really gave them a nice foundation on that side of the ball, something to build off of. And you saw that they were able to make a really good run in 2022 after he was fired for head coach Steve Wilks. Steve Wilks was able to get them cooking and almost got them into the playoffs the way that they were playing. So the defense is good, and the defense can be good. And if you go and really address the defensive side of things like the Raiders, I believe, are going to do this upcoming draft, that side of the ball could get turned around quick, fast, and hurry. And that's why I like that they spent so much energy and time and even money on the free agency side of things when it comes to the offense, because now they really can concentrate on the defense in the draft, and there's no excuses. Well, need this. Well, still need that. No, you don't. You did all that in free agency. Now go get the core of your team on the defensive side of things, and they can all grow together and be a really solid unit. That's what I'm excited about, but we'll see how it all shakes out. But Mario, it's good to hear from you, my man. Appreciate you. Next up, got a tweet from Joe. You can find him on Twitter at BRESHLO, Brieshlow, I'm assuming. He said, I sent you this back in February. I feel about Richardson the way you did about Hurts. I think Richardson's a hard worker, smart, really cares about football and how he plays. He'll continue to get better and is more skilled than Hurts. He has that it to me. Hope he is a Raider. And the tweet that he sent me back in February says, I know you're not a big AR-15 fan either. The one thing with him, though, is I think he's a dog. Watch the second half of the Florida State game. He's running, throwing, fighting for every inch. If I'm right and he's a dog with his skill, athleticism, and arm, how big of a risk is it to pass on him? That's from Joe on Twitter at Brieshlow, at BRESHLO. And yeah, the one thing about it is, and the difference between Jalen Hurts and Anthony Richardson is, I saw Jalen Hurts do it lots, right? I saw him in a lot of games, right? It's not like he only played 13 games in college. I saw him do it for a very long time at Alabama. And then I saw him go to Oklahoma and end up as a Heisman Trophy finalist. He didn't win it, but he was a finalist and completely changed his game. So that was the only difference. Anthony Richardson just doesn't have the body of work. which is something I've been talking about a lot. He's got literally 13 games under his belt, which is one more game than Trey Lance had, which is basically the same amount of games that that Mitchell Trubisky had when he was drafted by the Chicago Bears. So it's a little bit of a difference, but I understand what you're saying. And if you saw him a lot, just like I was telling DJ from the 909 on Wednesday's show, if you happen to see him and were able to cover him and maybe we saw him play in person and saw him, off the field and saw his work ethic, cool, right? Like I said, I have no problem with anyone that has a little bit more insight than I do. I'm not going to lie to you. Anthony Richardson wasn't on my radar like that. He was a guy that I knew was very athletic. He had the traits, but he just didn't have the body of work. So that's the only hang up when it comes to Anthony Richardson. But like I've said multiple times, there's that little Anthony Richardson on my shoulder saying, Q, draft me. I'm going to be Cam Newton 2.0. I'm going to be fantastic. I could be a Raider at Allegiant Stadium. Yeah, it's all those words are in my ears right now. And I'm trying to fight it off and stick to the plan and say defense. But man, that noise in my ear is getting a lot louder. Definitely for sure. So appreciate that tweet, my man, and keep them coming. Next up, got a call from Big Drew in H-Town. He's calling to talk about who he wants the Raiders to pick and why. Here he is, Big Drew out of Houston.
What up, Q? This is Big Drew calling out of Houston again. Again, want to say that I appreciate everything you do, man. First listen every day. I want to go over that first-round pick, whether I'd rather go corner or defensive lineman. And for me, it's an easy decision to go defensive lineman. As much as I like these corners in this class is just so deep. And I know that you go back and try to simplify it by going into the grade system. And I get that. I don't think there's that much of a difference in grade between someone like Christian Gonzalez and Tyree Wilson. For example, you can grade Gonzalez an A+ and Tyree Wilson an A, and in the second round, you can get another corner who's probably a B+ player, where you can't get a defensive lineman who's more probably a C. So would you rather have an A+ and a C or an A and a B? I'd personally go with the A and the B. Regardless, you look at a team like the Eagles, they have really good corners now, or they lost Slay, I know that, but they had 2 all-pro corners in James Bradbury and Darius Slay, and they got those through free agency. And I'm not saying for us to go and get those guys through free agency, but even before them, when they were drafting their own guys, they were still a really good defense with just decent corners. The last time that they drafted a corner in early round, I think, was Sidney Jones in the second round, and he's a bust. That didn't work out, and they still had a really good defense. I just think that you can I just think it's easier to find a corner in the later round, a good corner in the later round, than it is to find a defensive lineman. And obviously we found Max Crosby where we did, but we also found Nate Hobbs where we did. And I'm not saying Nate Hobbs is a great player. He plays like he's a second-round player, in my opinion. And then there's a player like Tyreek Woolen, who I know you were high on, who ended up going in the 5th round. And the list goes on and on with corners. I just think that it's a smarter idea or a more impactful idea to go defensive lineman in the first round. Sorry for the lengthy call. Anyways, have a good day, Q. Have a good day, Raider Nation. That's just my opinion on that. Big Drew out. Peace.
Big Drew, thanks for the call, man. I appreciate you, and I understand completely where you're coming from. When it comes to getting them impactful defensive linemen, if the grades are similar, so be it, right? That's what I've been talking about. Like if you have a defensive lineman and a corner and they both have the same grade or very close, go ahead, pick whatever your flavor is that you prefer, right? If you prefer that defensive lineman over a corner, no doubt, go get him. But if you have a defensive lineman that has a really high grade and you have a corner that has a lower grade, there's no reason to go and get the lower graded corner. There just isn't. Go get that defensive lineman, and vice versa. If you have a much higher rated grade on the corner and a much lower grade on the defensive lineman, go get the corner, right? I mean, again, I just think that the Raiders have to have talent, have to have more alphas on the field, period. Right? I mean, a really good corner can help out the pass rush. A really good pass rush can help out the corner. Anyone who says that they don't go hand in hand is crazy. And this is coming from a DB. And I say it all the time. DBs win games, but I know that they need help, and I know that they go hand in hand. A really good DB can help out a pass rush in a major way. There's such thing as called a coverage sack, right? And then there's a lot of times when corners get interceptions because the pressure was so good, the quarterback just got rid of it and threw an errant pass. So they go hand in hand. They absolutely do. The thing is, I mean, like, I don't even want to say we're arguing about it. We're just talking about guys that are difference makers. The Raiders need difference makers on all levels. I think that's something that we can all come to an agreement with. So thank you so much for that call, my man. I do appreciate you. Next up, got a text from Raider Zhang, and I think I just got time for about one more. He says, yo, Raider Zhang, love your show. I'll get right to it. We need to draft defense in our first 4 to 5 picks, starting with Gonzalez out of Oregon. We need to get back to the days where our defense is feared, our offense is good. I hear a lot of our line needs a lot of work, to where I disagree. They just helped Jacob secure the rushing title, and another year together, they could be better. That's all I got for now. Go Raiders, just win, baby. That's from Raider Zhang. And yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you for the text. And yeah, I think that we've all come to the agreement that the defense is something that needs a lot of work. Whether it's Gonzalez, whether it's Witherspoon, whether you go and get a corner a little bit later and get a defensive lineman, they just need to address the defense in a major way. The offensive line, I will say, I think they do need a right tackle. I know that, they did help Josh Jacobs get to the rushing title. That was a lot of fun to see him win that. But I think we can all agree that the pass blocking wasn't as good as it should have been. And if they had a real solid right tackle, I think that would make that offensive line that much better. Now, I think they're going to have more depth this year at the offensive line than they did last year. But I do think one more solid offensive lineman would be a big, big help. But Raider Zhang, thanks so much for that text. I do appreciate you. And I want to get greedy and do one more call, but that other shoulder has Ari on my shoulder saying, no, you've over the time limit. It's kind of like that commercial where it's like expired. You know that commercial? It's like that. That's what Ari's saying in my ear right now. Q, your time expired. He sounds like that too. No joke. Sorry, Ari. But you can find him on Twitter at Ari Produces. But yeah, he's trying to keep me on time. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap it up. Highlight Hendo, we'll get to your call tomorrow. Scott from the 469, we'll get to your text. And we'll get some more Todd McShay sounds. We'll have more news and notes. Maybe talk about Bryce Young and what he brought to the table today as he's visiting the Intermountain Healthcare Performance Center. Of course, Anthony Richardson is visiting on Friday. A lot of exciting times, man. And like I said, about 3 weeks away from the first round of the NFL draft in Kansas City on April 27th. So that's all I got for today's show. Again, thanks so much for making the show your first listen each and every day. Remember, you can find the show free and available on all platforms. For my guy Ari on Twitter at Ari Produces, I'm your boy Q. Of course, you'll catch us every single day here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Till tomorrow, take care of yourself, take care of your family, love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.